going to present is rather a field, and I'll talk about two small applications we did using this field, okay? The field are social and economic networks. I would probably like from the very beginning to say that I'm not referring to Facebook, Twitter, and similar social network media. I refer to network as a mathematical object, a graph. Okay, and I'm going to use what mathematicians call graph theory, and we call it a network theory, to think about social and economic phenomena. That's roughly the idea. Therefore, I will start giving a short, very, very short introduction to what I mean by social and economic networks. Okay, so when I talk about networks, I talk about graphs, so as I say, mathematical objects, which is a composition of circles and lines, generally. So I'll call the circles nodes and the lines links. Okay, where the nodes represent agents and the links relationships. Okay, and I will make a strong claim which says that virtually everything in economics can be represented as a network. Okay, I think I'm not wrong. Okay, it really depends on how you think about things, but I think I'm not wrong. But if you agree, okay, if I'm not wrong, then this is the networks is an important thing. Okay, and what I don't think about networks as a field. I rather see it as a perspective on something. Okay, well, how can it be useful for us? Well, agents can be anything, and the relationship can be almost anything too. Okay, so I will mostly talk about nodes as people, firms, countries, counties, you name it. Okay, and I will typically, when I talk about relationship, I can think about friendships. So this is the best example I typically use because it illustrates well the intuitions of networks. Okay, but I will think about who trades with whom, who talks with whom, I don't know what else, contracts, family ties, and what is important is that all these examples I'm using are things we think about in economics, finance, and management. Okay, so I think it will be useful, and I will try to convince you about that. Okay, well, networks they don't come from economics or management. They are actually mathematical objects, and they are widely used in other fields. So you can think about many other things networks can represent. Okay, but I will focus typically on social economic networks where people or firms are the nodes. Okay, I can give you thousands of examples. So I teach courses on networks. I can give thousands of examples of what networks can represent. Okay, economics. So any market can be represented as a network. Okay, so bilateral networks. We can think about trade networks. We can think about the relationship between banks and financial institutions. Okay, I will talk particularly about the structure of collaboration of scientists. Okay, this is what I will mention. And important thing, friendship networks or communication networks are important source how people learn about products and how people get convinced to adopt different products. These are the two applications I will talk about. Okay, but rather than giving you details, let me show you graphs. Okay, is it useful for economics? Well, this is an example of the World Trade Network. Okay. You cannot really see anything. The network has a lot of properties we can use, or those notions we can use to describe it, but this is just an example. This is the World Trade Network showing roughly, for example, the hierarchy in the world trade. Okay, US, China, Germany are the dominant countries. Probably Czech Republic will be somewhere there. The resolution is not good enough to see that. Okay, and what is important, the reason why we use the network perspective is that the structure of the network determines the performance of the system. The system is the planet here. Okay, and the positioning of the individual people are correlated with their success. Okay, and I will all the time be talking about the global structure, the global architecture, what it does, and about the positioning of the individual people within the system. Another example I have here is a network of the financial institution, of the largest financial institutions during the 2008 financial crisis. Okay, this network has been used to explain the failure, let me say the partial failure of the financial system around the world, okay, which caused the financial crisis. Okay, the reason is that some of the players, there's this expression in the American English, too big to fail, so some of these agents were too big to fail and they failed. Okay, I don't remember exactly the names, but JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch, and so on and so on, some of these big ones. They're very important. They were part of big clusters of firms, and they failed, and people and there was a financial contagion of financial problems. Okay, another clearly financial network. This is an example of the sectorial trade relationships. Okay, so these are chains of products between different sectors. Again, this graph was used to explain a little bit what happens in the US before the financial problems, because two sectors were extremely important there, again, too big to fail, the car industry and the financial sector. And again, the structure and the positioning provides a lot of information. And the two examples, before I get to my work, the two examples are related to what I'm going to talk about. Okay, so first, the first example from my work will be about collaboration in innovations. Okay, so this is an example of a network everybody here can understand. Every individual is a scientist, in fact, is an economist, and there is a link between them if they wrote a paper together. Okay, this is just a small part of the network around Jacques Thies, because he was very productive. Okay, and again, it generates a network. Okay, this is what I will call the collaboration network. Okay, I'll talk about patenting later on, but this is something that you can think about it. Okay, and again, you can look at one individual. I think there are like 4 Nobel Prizes somewhere in the graph. Okay, and you can see with whom they work, whether their co-authors work together too, whether they are central or not, and so on and so on. You can quantify their position. And the second application I'll talk about is a friendship network. This is just one example of a friendship network. A node is an individual, and there is a link if they say that they are friends with each other. Okay? So you can think about Facebook and Twitter. This is the same, but offline. Okay, so I could actually ask here to all of you who know each other, and I can represent a network, and the network would have a particular structure. Okay, this is a typical object studied by sociologists, but increasingly for the last 20 years, it's pretty common in economics. Why is this important? Well, what we consume, how we behave, depends a lot with whom we socialize, depends a lot on where we are in this graph, and so on and so on. Okay, so it will be important. So my second application I'll talk about will be about the role of word-of-mouth communication in adoption of one particular product. Okay, very specific, but I'll explain that. Okay, so what is more important? Okay, so the class I will give to my student during one semester is in one slide. Well, there is a huge evidence of the role of the social networks. Okay, I already mentioned it, particularly the global architecture, the whole structure, determines the performance of the system. So it determines what we consume, it determines how productive we are producing innovations, and so on and so on. And then where we are within the network determines how we do, relatively speaking, to the others. Okay, and there is a huge evidence on many different effects. We talk about peer and network effects. Okay, we talk about diffusion, flow of information. There's a lot of other terms I could use. Okay, I'm not going to talk about all of this. I actually cite there the main 3 books in economics by Fernando Vega de Rondo, Sanjeev Goyal, and Matt Jackson. These are like the 3 textbooks, and there are some recent surveys by Jan Bramule and Matt Jackson again, with some other people. Okay, so rather than going now to the broad perspective, let me go to 2 examples from my work that illustrates a little bit the usefulness of such network perspective. Okay, so I selected 2 particular applications. more related, according to me, more related to the topics of this conference. Okay, so my first example is innovation. Okay, how people and firm innovate, and the second example will be about product adoption. So let me start with the first one. Okay, so this is a paper published a few years ago. And the idea of the paper is, or the motivation of the paper is very simple. Okay, in economics, we know that growth is closely correlated to innovation. Okay, technology, creation. Okay, so we know that over the last 60 years, innovation is increasingly a collaborative activity, meaning that, in our case, papers are written more and more between more than one author. So most of the papers in economics, but other fields are co-authored. The same patents are increasingly presented by groups of teams. Okay? If I represent every innovator or every scientist as a node and collaboration as a link, this generates what we call a collaboration network. Okay? So there is a large literature in many fields, particularly in management, I would say, that analyzes these collaboration networks. Okay? And they show that they are important. Okay? And again, the same idea, it's the same wherever we apply these ideas. What matters is the global structure. So for example, California and Boston has a network of collaboration which enhances collaboration compared to Nevada, for example. Okay? The collaboration network, although they are not organized, they are naturally organized better in California for many reasons than Nevada, for example. That's just an example. Okay, and the same way we know that those positioned in the central positions or cohesive neighborhoods in the network perform better. Okay, more patents, more papers, and so on and so on. Okay, the pure network perspective is a little bit more recent, so this has been known for many decades. The pure network perspective is a little bit more recent. Okay, and now using the what we call network theory, a few recent articles, I cite two of them, like one of the big ones, show which features of networks and which aspects of the positioning matters. Okay, so the simple argument, I haven't explained what exactly the features, but it's simple to understand as the more connections I have, the more I produce, for example, the more innovative I am. It's easy to understand that the more central I'm global in the network, the more productive I am because I can access many things, I hear about many things. Okay, if I'm a broker in the network, it means that many information flows through me, so I'm more innovative because I can combine different approaches. Okay, it's good to be in neighborhoods that are the intermediate levels of cohesion, for example. Too little cohesion, too much cohesion is bad, and there are other things we already don't know about that. Okay, so what we ask, or the simple question we make in this work is whether it matters how we define the network. And in particular, we ask the question is whether being well embedded in regional networks is different or influence my innovation differently compared to being embedded in the, for example, national network. Okay? So you can imagine about the network of collaboration within California, and you can imagine the network of innovation in the whole US, and we ask whether both networks have the same role. Okay? This is an important question because the answer I will give you in a second is actually no. Okay, so what we did, we focused on innovation in Spain, which simply had the data. Okay, and we use patent data. Okay, we use all the patents presented by any Spanish subject, be it individual, firm, university, research center. Okay, these are our nodes, and then we look who presented the patent with whom. This generates a relationship. Okay, so the same way you can think that you have papers with co-authors, this generates a co-authorship network. This is an innovation network of innovators and who co-patent together. This generates a network. Okay, I can show the network here. Okay, I'll get back to it in a second. Okay, we have all the data about all the Spanish inventors in the European database, in all the history. Okay, and we ask how the current network influences future patenting outcomes of the innovators. That's a very simple question. Okay, so I'm really interested how the network, how my positioning on the network and how the whole structure of the network influences what the people do later, in fact 10 years later, in the next decade. This is how we divided our data. That's a simple question. Okay, however, we already know this matters, so what we ask is whether it matters to look at the purely regional versus the national network. That's our idea, okay? So this is our approach, this is the graph we have in the paper, okay? The whole network is the national network, and what I just take one part of the network out from the network, looking at, depending on the regions in Spain. And I'm asking whether what matters is the national one or the regional one. Or whether both of them matter, and that's the question, okay? So this is a simple graph from here. In the real data, it's a bit more complex. We have the Spanish network, and here I show you the 3 largest regional networks, Madrid, Barcelona, and Valencia. Okay, so you see that there's things. We can again take the bottom ones and plug them into the top one. The same way, okay? And I'm not going to give you much more details. We made a lot of exhaustive regression analysis. And the main idea is that in our analysis, we make the regional and the national networks compete in the modeling approaches. Well, what do we observe? Well, already from the very beginning, the correlations between the local positioning and the global positioning, local I mean region, global I mean national, Spain, okay, the correlations are positive, okay, the centrality, cohesion, are positive but relatively low. It already means that the positioning of the firms is a little bit different at these 2 levels. Okay, and when we started to do analysis, our country level analysis simply corroborates what we already know from the US, Canada, Germany, okay? So the networks are very important and can enhance collaboration. Being in good position and being in a good neighborhood is important for innovation. When we look at the positioning within the regional network and the structure at the regional level, in fact, what we observe is, at best, no influence whatsoever. Okay? What it means? Well, this exercise, looking at the network from different fields at different geographical levels, means that the embeddedness matters, but it crucially depends on how we define the network. In this case, the national one is the one that explains what's going on. The regional level doesn't say much about that. And if something, it shows that actually it's bad to be well embedded in the local network. That's probably the idea, okay? I'm not going to talk about the interpretations. We have it in the paper. I don't have time to do. How am I doing? I'm doing well, okay. Okay, so there are very good reasons. So for example, being central in the local network means that I have to maintain a lot of relationship with people in my city. These people are the same as me. These people already know everything I know. So maybe it doesn't benefit me to sustain all these relationships. At the end, it's costly to sustain relationship, okay? While if I am connected to people all across the country, different ideas, different approaches, okay, access to different economic, social, and knowledge resources. So there are good reasons why this is important. However, the message is key. The message key is that before we start any network analysis, we have to very carefully define the network. So anytime we work with some data, we are subject to the criticism that maybe we don't have the right network. Well, I presented this talking about the network at the level of regions and the country, but probably I can extend this critique to the worldwide collaboration network, okay? Which I don't observe, but probably the results might be different, maybe more important when I look at the network of the collaboration at the whole planet. Okay? So this is the first application of network theory combined with some econometrics theory. My second application, it's about networks of friends. Let me call it communication network. And I'm going to talk about product adoption and I'm going to focus on a very specific product, which is mobile phone banking. Okay? And we did this experiment in Peru, so I'm talking about the development context. Let me give you a little bit of a background. So this is a new paper, which is not published so far. So let me give you motivation. The idea is very simple. We know in the developing world that access to bank account is important. There is some evidence, causal evidence, showing that having a bank account gives more opportunities to open new firms. Okay, you have to think about the smaller businesses. Okay, people save more. Okay, and there are some other advantages. Okay, so there is a clear consensus that access to banks increases the probability to escape poverty in the developing world. Okay, there is lots of work by Esther Duflo, Banerjee, all these people around tech. Okay, the problem is particularly more serious for women. Okay, for many reasons, which I am not going to talk about. And from the beginning of I would say, of this century, we know very well that there is one very simple solution: mobile phone banking. Okay, why? Well, I think last year 96% of the planet where we have people have phone coverage. Okay, if you travel in the developing world, people have better cell phones than I have. Okay, it's relatively cheap today. So the hope of the World Bank and OECD and one of their priorities actually is that everybody should have access to a bank through the mobile phone. However, this is not happening. Okay, for the moment in the development world, the adoption of mobile phones is huge. It's as high as here, but the adoption, access to bank is still very low. People don't want it. Okay, there is a lot of reasons. They don't trust it. Okay, so probably the two main are trust and literacy. Okay, these are the two main problems for that. Okay, so financial inclusion, priority of economic development. Okay, is to promote that. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about, so we were actually hired by Peruvian government to propose a strategy that would promote the use in rural Peru, and especially among women. Okay, I'll skip this because it's not that relevant here. Okay, adoption of banking. So what we proposed, and this is why it's related to my talk, we will propose to use social networks. Okay, and again, I'm not talking about Facebook, I'm talking about offline social networks. So very briefly, I have a lot of details I will skip, but very briefly. What we did is a field experiment. It's one small area in northern Peru where we did a small experiment, relatively small field experiment in collaboration with a Peruvian state agency called Juntos, okay, which fights against poverty, targets poor areas, okay, and since they are a conditional cash transfer program, they transfer money to their beneficiaries, is what they call. They promote financial inclusion. And they particularly work with women because they target children. Okay? And so what they need is to be able to transfer the money, but these people have no accounts. So they asked us to promote a strategy. Okay? What we used here, as I told you, social networks, so we use local leaders who are the connection between the program and the local communities. Okay, and what is important, these leaders were selected by the communities, meaning that they are trusted. Okay, and if I talk about networks, they are important in the local community networks. So we are going to try to use these people as the promoters, as ambassadors of mobile banking. Okay, this is sort of the idea. So there is a lot of detail I didn't tell you. Okay, we have a control areas, treatment areas. Let me skip and let me focus on what we did with the people. Okay. So this is a small area in northern Peru, particularly poor and particularly dangerous, actually, in fact. So we were actually advised to use this area. Okay, what we did, first of all, we collected a lot of data on the people. Among these data, we collected the social networks. We know who is friends with whom. Okay. Once we had this data, we invited these local leaders and we instructed them in the functioning, the usefulness of a particular mobile application. It's called BIM. Everybody knows it in Peru. I didn't know it before. Okay, and we incentivize them to promote this in the communities. Okay, we pay them money. That's very simple. So we call it incentivized seeded diffusion. Okay, and then we tracked the diffusion or adoption of the mobile banking. We simply see who downloads the application and uses it. Okay, I'm going to talk about the adoption, the download of the application because we weren't given good data on the use, so I don't have information on that. Privacy issues, banks. Okay, this is the idea. So I'm going to use important people in the networks to diffuse the product, and I'm going to see what happens there. Then we made, there was a marketing campaign, very classic, unpersonalized approach, okay? I have this photo here, there were some radio ads, I don't know what else, radios, posters, and the third, I don't remember now. There was something third, okay? Very classic, unpersonalized thing. You see, it says, okay, you can send money all around Peru for free, yearly using this application, this BIM, okay? This was done later, and then once the marketing campaign finished, we again relaunched this personalized diffusion of banking using this local leaders, simply to see whether, if marketing doesn't work, maybe it's because of market saturation. That's the simple idea. Okay, there is some timing, let me skip it. This is just an example of the network. I'm not going to show you more pictures of that, but this is really what it does. We have different villages. We targeted some of the villages. People know each other across the villages, but there is a clear segregation in terms of who lives where. Okay, so I'm going to see how through the network starts the adoption of this product. Okay, and let me go to the results. Okay, so I would probably like to compare mostly what I call seed one with the campaign. Okay, simply speaking, this personalized approach through these leaders increases the adoption between local women by 10%. In the whole population of this, it was like 2%, while the marketing campaign didn't have any effect. Okay, it's completely non-significant. Okay, and when we relaunch, so after the campaign, we start again with the personalized approach, using this network thing. Again, it goes up. Okay? So, marketing campaign, the traditional, it doesn't work. And it seems that for this type of products that requires certain trust, that's our arguments, we need some more personalized approaches. Okay? So let me quantify a little bit. How am I doing with time? I'm okay? Okay. So let me just focus. Sorry for that. So, let me just show you a little bit the second result. Okay, so how important the networks are. So we looked a little bit at the mechanisms behind the diffusion. So we know that now among the local women from the community, 10% start to use this mobile phone applications for things they want. We don't control that. And we had a look at the mechanisms, okay? What determines who adopts the application, okay? There are the typical natural reasons, okay? So people who are richer, they need more money, they are more likely to need a bank account, and they adopt are more likely. More educated people, once you explain them what's going on, what are the risks and how safe it is, more likely, so this is the classic. This is nice because it makes us confident that what was happening is reasonable. Okay, makes sense. And then we looked at how the network, okay, so I'm going to, the second part of explanations are the social mechanisms or network mechanisms. So I'm going to ask how this affects who adopts, okay? Here I have two results that show that what matters here is the trust. Okay? So first of all, people who adopt are closer in the network to the leaders. Okay, so they are more likely to trust them. The second determinant is, we call it clustering coefficient. I didn't explain that, but simply a measure of how cohesive, how trustful, how cooperative the neighborhood of an individual is. Okay, so what we observe that people who are close to the leaders and who share with the leaders environment that is good for cooperation and trust are more likely to adopt this application. Okay? They are simply more likely to be convinced to start using something like mobile phone banking. Okay? So apart from the economic reasons, there are important network reasons network determinants that make people use certain products. Okay, I think I can skip this because it's a similar thing. So let me conclude. Good. Okay, so let me conclude. Okay, so as I say, I was very brief. I just wanted to illustrate one particular perspective on economic management, business systems, which is a network perspective. Okay, and I tried to show you two examples illustrating the use that it can indeed be useful and it can add something to the non-network perspective on the system. Okay, I focused on so within all these network effects we know from the literature, I focus on two particular things. Okay, the role of networks for innovation. So being particularly embedded promotes how well we do. Okay, it's true for innovation, but I can come up with other examples when it also matters. Okay, there is, for example, correlation between integration, segregation in the networks and salaries. Okay, a lot of data on these things. Then I look about the promotion of a particular product that requires trust. Okay. So what I did is a very short introduction. From now, we can ask thousands and thousands new questions, different or directly related to our work. So it works for mobile banking. Would it work for something else, like vaccination, big problem in developing world? Or, okay, would it work for normal products? Okay, again, we know there are peer effects. Do we need trust, no trust? Okay, I was talking about these offline networks, but online data are more and more available again, so it would be good to work with offline versus offline networks. I don't know, I don't have any work on that. I was talking that we have to define what exactly network mean, who we include, who we don't include, okay, but also how we define the relationship. Well, okay, all these things are very important, so there is a lot of methodological issues. And obviously we would like to know how general all these results are, whether we can incorporate it in the general network business or marketing theory, for example. Okay, so I think that's all. I don't think I have anything else. That's it. So thank you very much for listening.